For that, Claire Pride in the newsroom. Welcome back. Welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. It's the biggest test of François Hollande's presidency to date. The decision to send ground troops and bomb the Islamist held north of Mali. The Malian foreign minister in Paris this Monday. Mali, which ever since March and the rebel advance there had been split. In Bamako, there had been a split over the concept of foreign intervention. A lot's happened, though, in 10 months. There was a coup in the capital, Bamako, that precipitated the takeover of the north by hardliners who shocked the world with their application of strict Sharia law and the destruction of centuries-old Sufi shrines in the mythical town of Timbuktu. Now, the junior officers who led a coup against the outgoing president say they're in favor of French intervention. We'll hear a little bit later on from their leader. This as they themselves sustain losses in the fighting. Joining us, he's a former French Defense Ministry official, Pierre Conessa, teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Welcome, sir. Gregory Mann of Columbia University is with us. So is François Ndengwe of the African Advisory Board, a journalist and filmmaker, Michael Kirtley. And joining us from the University of SUNY State University of New York at Cortland is Kassim Kone, who's watching events in his native Mali, as well as Algerian-born Imad Mesdou, a political analyst working for Pasco Risk Management. Welcome to all of you. Before we go to our panel, let's go to Mali and France 24's Mathieu Mabin, who has been close as you can get to the front lines. Mathieu, what's the reaction to the way events are unfolding? What with the French defense minister saying that one town, Diabali, in the east of the country, had fallen to the rebels today?
There is not much reaction in the region where I am. I am, as you just said, in Sévaré. Sévaré will be the headquarters of the multinational operation, which will be led in the next few days. The event in Diabali is finally the continuing of the story who began 3 days ago when the French Air Force hit a column of pickup of vehicles full of Islamist rebels. Some of them were killed, some vehicles were destroyed, some weapons were destroyed, but at least 40 or 50 fighters were still on the ground. Some very particular fighters, because those fighters are known to be Malian resident, local fighters. We were very quickly recruited by some Islamist leaders in the last months. Those fighters, without any head, without any commander, entered the city of Diabali. But the city of Diabali was not defended by the Malian army at this time. The Malian army was gathered where I am, where I'm speaking from, in the north, in the middle of the country, in this city of Sévaré. So they entered the city very easily, and they are now inside the city, protected by human shields, the population of Diabali, and fighting the Malian army and very few French special forces on the ground.
So a bit of a game of cat and mouse as well. Mathieu Mabin, is there a sense when you've spoken with the French army of what the mission is exactly?
Oh yes, the mission is very simple. The troops on the ground were sent initially to protect the capital Bamako. At the moment, the capital Bamako is not targeted by the Islamist rebellion. The Islamist rebellion is too busy defending itself and running from the main cities of the north of the country. Those troops are supposed to come to the middle of the country in this area of Sévaré, where they will keep the line which cuts the country into two pieces, the north and the south. This is the main mission. The air mission, the mission which is led at the moment by the French Air Force is very, very clear. They have to destroy all the Islamist rebellion positions in the main city of the north of the country. This is what happened in Gao, in Kidal, and also in Timbuktu, around Timbuktu airport during those last 4 days.
And again, the French foreign minister so far playing coy, it seems, in terms of how long that operation will take. Mathieu Mabin, thank you for joining us there from just nearby the city of Mopti in central Mali for that live update. Pierre Conessa, your reaction to the way things are going after 4 days, listening to what Mathieu just had to say?
Well, it's quite difficult to react because, you know, the war agenda is quite different of media's agenda. I mean, that's the second days of the war, which means that one can announce a victory and the other one also. So I do think that the first intervention of conventional forces against this kind of insurrection, I mean, this kind of rebels, at the first time is always victory, because, you know, they are not waiting for a conventional intervention, which means it's quite simple to target, you know, depots, plants,
the elements
military plants, etc. Yes, it's a surprise effect. And immediately, you know, this kind of rebels, widespread, you know, all over the territory. And one must not make mistake looking at the map of Mali, because, you know, it looks like a kind of channel, you know, and just in the middle of Mali. But this border has no significance at all. I mean, there are no borders, which means that if the rebels decide to pass through Niger to come to the south, it's possible too. They can pass through Burkina Faso too, which means that, you know, this fight just in the middle is not significant at all.
Michael Kirtley, it's sort of akin to Libya, where there was the battles in towns, and then around it is just vast swathes of empty countryside.
Well, this area in northern Mali is one of the harshest wastelands, I think, that exists in Africa. And certainly in terms of the people that live there, at this particular point, you have outsiders that are ruling the game. That's very important to understand. And therefore, even to call them rebels is kind of an interesting misnomer, in my opinion, because you do have rebels. You have two groups of rebels. You have the MNLA on the one side who are secular, and you have the Ansar Dine on the other side who are extremist Islamists. But you also have these two groups called Mujahou and Al-Qaeda of the Islamic Maghreb, who are for the most part made up of foreigners, or at least foreign elements. And so I think
that's an important point. We got taken to task a little bit earlier for calling them rebels. Is it what should we be calling them?
My personal opinion is we need to call them what they are. It's also, I think, bad to call them Islamists. They may be Islamists, but they're not Islamists in the same way that the Islamists are in North Africa at this particular point. They're fighting Islamists. So I prefer the term jihadis, or extremists, or militants. But Islamists doesn't really solve any problem in understanding who these people are, in my opinion.
And we can hear a couple of reactions. We were mentioning a little bit earlier on about how the attitudes to this intervention vary. François Ndengwe, you've made the point about how Africans have to step up to the plate. Let's listen to some reactions. First, that of Mali's interim president, who spoke Friday after the French president announced Paris's deployment.
I asked for and obtained air support from France within an international legal framework. Mali and its people are not alone.
That legal framework, the United Nations and the Economic Community of West African States, the UN, where another meeting is taking place this Monday behind closed doors on the situation in Mali. Now, the leader of the March coup we mentioned, who after much mediation returned to barracks, doing an about-face now, it seems, and backing as well the French intervention.
We have launched attacks without waiting for any help. And we're congratulating ourselves for having the French by our side today. They're playing a major role in the air support and today's operations. Right now, I'm talking to you as a happy man. Right now, because of the damage, because of military secrecy, I won't discuss the details today on television. But I want to say thank you to all our partners.
Gregory Mann, is that an about-face complete? Am I right in saying that it's a complete about-face on the part of Captain Sanogo?
180 degrees. Captain Sanogo has been very opposed to any kind of foreign intervention in Mali. He's been opposed to the presence of ECOWAS, West African or French troops, especially in Bamako, which was one of the hot political questions of the spring and the summer, was whether or not kind of foreign intervention force could both help the Malian army in the north against the Islamists and secure the government institutions in the south, in Bamako itself. Now, the unremarked story in what's going on is, of course, that a number of soldiers of France and other African nations joining them soon have been sent to the north, but there are now several hundred French soldiers based in Bamako. This is important because it actually boosts the political hand of Dioncounda Traoré against Sanogo, who still plays a very large role, although he's no longer claiming to be the head of state. He still is very much a kingmaker, as we saw last month when he deposed the sitting Prime Minister, Sheikh Modibo Jar, and replaced him with the current Prime Minister, Django Sissoko.
Why did he switch positions?
On the intervention, I think he had very little choice in terms of switching positions. I think it seems to me, from what I understand, that the Malian army was taking heavy losses late last week, and that they knew that they were not going to be able to defend Sévaré, and that they needed outside help, and they had to accept that. I think Sanogo at this point wants to remain relevant as well, and he wants to pretend to be leading, even if in fact he's reacting to the situation.
Kassim Koné, do you agree?
It's for his own survival. I think that he's doing this just to survive. He doesn't control the situation in Mali anymore. No, the presence of the French military, the presence of ECOWAS soldiers in the next few days are just going to significantly change the whole situation. As you mentioned, it's going to boost Dioncounda's hand politically. And it also may actually bring about, some positive change, in the military. It's a very undisciplined military, and it's a military in total disarray, as Professor Mann just mentioned. It's in a position of weakness vis-a-vis the jihadists and the rebels, and so Sanogo doesn't have a choice. He's trying to save his own skin at this point of time.
All right, and another, what seems like an about-face, at least, the main Tuareg rebel group, the MNLA, that Michael Kirtley was mentioning, they've put out a statement saying, we're ready to help. We are already involved in the fight against terrorism. Imad Mesdoua, can you put that in context?
Basically, I think this change in position is to adapt to the current developments on the ground. That they want to remain relevant, and I think they're basically pushing for one of the solutions that Algeria had presented earlier on, which is to distinguish and try to isolate between the different groups that are currently acting in the region. One of your guests rightly mentioned the differences that we must try to find between the groups, and the MNLA is certainly trying to distinguish itself, I think, from the other militant groups. Yeah.
All right. So several groups then falling in line, and we mentioned how it's a French-led intervention, but they're not alone, the French, anymore. Several other Western European nations, although they're not sending ground troops, are nonetheless providing logistical support. Germany, the latest to say so. The UK, though, was the first to offer its help and to provide military transports. The British Prime Minister, speaking on Radio 4, said that we were the first out of the blocks to say the French will help you, we'll work with you, and we'll share what intelligence we have with you and try to help you with what you're doing. François Ndenkwe, the fact that Western European nations are also taking a certain part in this operation, that it has the rubber stamp of ECOWAS, it has the rubber stamp of the United Nations. This doesn't make it a case where it's a classical French intervention as we've seen in the past.
Yes, France is a member of a number of alliances, and when France is involved in a situation like this, it's quite normal that the countries that are with France can stand by the side of France. But I think we have to see what is the major issue here. The major issue here is the inability of Africans to solve security problems on their land. And this is the central, unless we put the finger on this situation and found how to solve it, we will not advance anymore. And I remember that President Modibo Keïta, in her speech, famous speech, June '62, he said the issue of sovereignty of a state. You know, the sovereignty of a state relies on three sides of a triangle. You have the military, you have the monetary, and you have the law. Here, you have the collapse of each of these sides of triangle. The military, there's no more military. The monetary, this is a francophone, so-called francophone country in the CFA francs, because if you have to fight a war, you need resources. Where are the resources coming from? So, and when you go out of Mali, you have to look at ECOWAS. We're talking of, it's not something that started a week ago. You almost have a year. So what are the organizations? The UK can come to help France, but what are Africans doing? What are they doing? I think we have to go back to this. This is a very important issue, and we have to look at it, to look at the truth, look at the mirror, and see what have we done.
Pierre Connaisseur, that's an important point, that Mali's army, we talk about training them, and the politicians in every speech mention, we're going to train the forces just as they do in Afghanistan. We're going to train the forces and get them. Mali's army, they've been training them for a long, long time. In fact, Captain Sanogo himself did military training in the United States with the Marines.
Well, one must keep in mind, you know, that the history of Mali state is the problem of Tuareg question, which means that this army has led a lot of military intervention in the north, with some really brutal interventions in the north, and that's because of this collapse that this army is not able today to manage this region. They have a very bad image in the north, which means that as soon as you say we are defending the Malian state, what does that mean exactly? Do we have to defend this kind of intervention? Do we have to defend this kind of government, which is quite bad classification in the Transparency International hierarchy? I mean, there is a question behind this French intervention. What are we doing precisely? Do we have to rebuild the Malian state? I don't believe we are able to. And the last question is what the terms we are using. Who is the enemy? I mean, who is the terrorist? Is there jihadist? I do think that we have to call them Salafists, because this is a branch of Islam which is having its roots in the Ambali Islam conception, which has its roots in Saudi Arabia. And what are we fighting against? I don't believe, I don't understand.
All right, so the terminology important in figuring out who exactly the French are fighting. Stay with us. We're going to be back after a quick break. This is the France 24 debate.